So, what if I tell you that there is a way to improve your IELTS reading score almost instantly without having to touch on your grammar and your vocabulary? Yes, there is a way. And in this video, I'll be sharing 5 tips that are going to help you. So, IELTS reading, you would notice that you have 40 questions and you are expected to complete those 40 questions in 1 hour. Now, here is what you can do that can help you. Usually, for those 40 questions, we know that there are 3 sections: section 1, section 2, and section 3. Usually, they would advise, just like you can see on the screen, that you should spend about 20 minutes on each section. You usually see it at the beginning of each section for you to spend that number of time. But it doesn't work, trust me. So, one thing you should know is that the IELTS exam is divided, that is the reading section, just like I said, is divided into 3 sections. And those 3 sections are the difficulty increases as you go down. So section 1 is usually 1 to 13, that is for the academic. Section 2 is 14 to 26, and section 3 is 27 to 40. Okay, while for general, it's a little bit different. 1 to 14 for the first section. Section 2 is 15 to 27, and then section 3 is 28 to 40. So, one thing that you will discover as you practice the exam is that section 3 tends to be the hardest. You have the longest passage, you have words that are more advanced, you have advanced vocabulary, they're usually academic in nature, and so you might find it difficult. Why is this information that I'm telling you very important? So that's why I said that the principle of spending 20 minutes for each section does not work. Because if you are to spend 20 minutes here, which is said to be the simplest, that's section 1, how many minutes are you going to spend in section 2, which is a little bit harder, and section 3, which tends to be the most difficult? And so this is what you want to do instead in terms of your time management. You want to focus on being able to finish section 1 in about 50 minutes, at most 50 minutes, because it tends to be the simplest part of the exam. And then you can spend 20 minutes in section 2. So that 5 minutes you've saved in section 1, you then want to use the extra time for section 3, so that in that way you have enough time to go through the complex text of section 3. Now, another thing to note, or another tip that is very useful, is when a question is giving you difficulties, please move on. Move on in terms of, I'm not saying you should forget about it, but move on, note it down to answer later, and then you can come back to it. But don't let any question type slow you down. So if you know that some question types come easily to you, you want to address those first so that you gain momentum, so that as time passes by, I've tried as much as possible to answer all the questions that are easy to me. And then you can now spend the remaining time to focus on the ones that are difficult for you. Let's move right to tip 2. Put to you is read the question first. Yes, most people like to go over the passage just to skim, or read the passage first just to understand what it is that the passage is all about. And so that technique is wrong. You want to make sure that you read your question before you read the passage. If I thought you're going through the passage before the question, is just to skim and scan to get the general idea of what the passage is all about or what they're talking about. But ideally, to save you time, you should read your question first, because your question then tells you what exactly you are looking for in the passage. And this strategy has helped my students a lot to save time. So, for example, if we look at this question before us, I can see the subheadings already that I am underlining are signposts for me. So that means that if I see these words in the passage, automatically it tells me where to focus on to get my answers to the questions that are under each of those segments. And so that's what you should do. Your question tells you what you are looking for. And so you're not reading the passage just to understand or just to have a knowledge about it. It is not a novel or a self development book that you're reading. You're actually reading the passage to answer some questions. So you want to read the questions, you want to highlight certain things as to, okay, these are words that if I see them in the passage, either exactly the way they are or paraphrase, they give me an idea of where my answers stand. And so when you treat your passages this way, it makes it easier, it makes it faster than first reading the passage first, trying to understand it, time is going, and then you go to the question, you read it and say, oh, okay, let me come and a lot of time has gone. So read the question, go through it as to, okay, what exactly am I looking for in the passage? And then you come to the passage to answer the questions. All right. Actually, building on the second tip I mentioned as to reading the question first. The third tip has to do with, should I read the whole of the passage or not? For most of the question types that come out when it comes to IELTS writing, you don't have to read all of the passage. In fact, you find out that for most question types, you just need to focus on a sentence or two in a paragraph to be able to answer the questions. And so this is where your words, that is the words in the question, guide you into what exactly it is that you're looking for in the passage. And I'm going to give an example using this same question. So we can see, so I'm just going to do 15 and 16 as an example. It says lifting equipment must be manufactured well, e.g., have a dash on it. And so I'm just going to underline things that I think are going to help me, that are going to serve as a signpost for me in the passage. And then 16 says, may need to undergo dash before use. And so undergo what? May before use. All right. So what I am going to do is I'm going to try to look for these words in the passage. So I can see lifting equipment. I can see lifting equipment here. I can also see equipment used for lifting. So that's another tip that you should know in terms of the words in the question might not be said word for word, with what is in the passage. They might be paraphrased, they might be put in another manner. So the next thing that I am doing is manufactured, I can see constructed. Can you see what I'm saying about paraphrasing? So another one before use. Okay, so I can see proud to using the equipment. Okay, which is same thing as before use. And so to read it, I will just read it and then put in the words. It says all equipment used for lifting or moving heavy subjects should be properly constructed. The same thing as manufactured well in the question. And it says, for example, and here it says example. So I know I'm to focus on that. It says equipment bearing a CE mark had been manufactured to international standard. So on it, of course, I'm going to write CE mark. Okay. And then 16, it says may undergo dash before use. So I'm now going to focus on this sentence where I so proud to use it. It says in addition, equipment that meets this standard will have documented instructions for tests that should be adhered to before using the equipment. And it says may need to undergo tests. Okay, that'll be my word. So can you see that I didn't have to read all of the passage to be able to answer question 15 to 16. And so that's the way it works. The keywords in your question guides you in the passage. Once you see a paraphrase of those words that you've seen in your question, you know that, okay, I'm to focus on this sentence or the sentence around it and just follow. Okay, so that's the third tip as to you don't have to read all of the passage for some question types. But you will notice that there are certain things that help, like highlighting. Highlighting the words in the passage, highlighting the words in the question helps me to know where to focus on. So I'm not confused. I'm not looking out all over the passage and all of that. And so that's an habit that you must practice when it comes to question types that follow the order of the passage or reading generally, because usually your questions will lead you to exactly it is what it is that you're looking for. Another habit that you must learn in terms of reading is that you must learn to manage your time wisely, especially for those who are doing the paper based test. One thing that you find out is for most people, they tend to do that same mistake where in listening, you know that if you're writing the paper based test, you have 10 minutes to transfer your answer. For reading, it does not happen that way. You don't have any extra time. And so, one thing that you can do is either as you are writing, you answer directly into your answer sheet. Or what you can do is once you are done with a particular section and you know that, okay, I've completed this to a certain extent and I'm sure of the answers, you can transfer it into your answer sheet. But don't forget, you have no extra time to transfer your answer in the answer sheet. So to submit your answer sheet, it's all within the 1 hour they've given you. So you want to be mindful of that. Another thing that I know that people do or that makes them overwhelmed or that makes them confused is a lot of these free apps, free practice tests, and all of that. And most times you find out that these practice tests are usually probably too hard or too easy. So you want to make an habit of using the Cambridge official questions to practice because they are the ones who set the exam. Even the IDP and the British Council, basically, they're just organizations which carry out the center for the exam for people. They don't set the questions themselves. The questions in the Cambridge Standard past questions are the standard of the exam. They give you the right level of difficulty. They give you the right standard of the exam. They give you the right format of the exam because you don't want to be misled by different practice questions. I've had a case where a student relied on apps to do listening practice, and she had to come to me and say, I'm confused. What you're teaching me using the past questions is quite different from what I'm seeing on the apps. It sounds vague. And I tell her, no, it's not going to be as complicated as whatever you are seeing on the apps. You can tell me to give you more standard questions for you to work with, but don't focus on saying, I want to do practice tests that are stick to something that actually exemplifies or is a mirror of what you are going to see in the exam hall. Okay? And before we go, we move to the last tip. So the last tip is that while practicing, it's not just about practicing. You want to make sure that you actually go back to the passage after marking, after finding out your scores as to where you missed it. And most times, so people focus on, oh, I need to practice more questions, and they're demanding, oh, I need about 10 sets of past questions. It's not about that. You have to go beyond that. You have to go back to the passage. Okay, let's say, for example, you got 27 over 40 or you got 38 over 40, whatever it is. Go back to the passage, go back to the question, and try to see if you can understand the logic behind what they said is the right answer. Sometimes it might be that, okay, you were focusing on the wrong part of the passage, or sometimes it might be that you didn't properly read the passage, or is that you missed some words while reading the question. But you must figure it out so that that way you are able to note the errors in your pattern or the errors that you make while addressing a certain question type. And I'll give an example. There is a student of mine that usually struggles with true, false, not given. We've gone over the exercise several times. And so I told them, you know what? Go back to the passage and I want you to do a self analysis by yourself. Go back to the passage and try to see if you could locate by the answer is what they say it is. And she found out that, okay, most times our problem is focusing on the wrong part of the passage. And so we had to work on our recognizing paraphrases, how to know the right place to focus on. And so that's what revising, analyzing, reviewing actually does for you. It helps you notice, okay, what am I doing wrong? What can I do right instead? Okay, this is something, these are the traps I usually fall for. Oh, okay, I can avoid it by doing this. All right, so we've come to the end, and let me know in the comment section how these tips are helpful for you. Thank you so much for watching me today. Subscribe, follow, like, comment on how it has been helpful for you. I remain your IELTS tutor for African professionals. Feyi Adeomi. Bye.